All right, welcome back to the channel. Today we got an exciting video. We're gonna take this rusty SX frame, we're gonna restore it, but I'm most excited about this lithium iron phosphate battery. This is a more stable technology than lithium ion, and it's this group 24 size, but it fits really nice in this SX frame. So we're gonna hook this all up and I'm gonna try to build this for under 500 bucks. So let's tackle that. All right, now first thing we need to do is really clean this frame up. As you can see, she's pretty rusty, but honestly, with some elbow grease, we're gonna use steel wool to get all that rust off, and then we're gonna wet sand it, clean it all up, and give it a nice paint with some Rust-Oleum. Yeah, it's better to powder coat this stuff, but we don't have time for that. So we'll get it looking all pretty. We'll mount this battery. It's really only going to take some straps because we already have a wedge in here, which makes it really nice. And this battery can also fit vertically as well. And I've asked them, it is fine to mount this battery on its side or normal way up. They confirmed that'd be okay. But for aesthetics, I think it looks really nice. Just keeping it that way. And we have some matching paint. We're also not going to put the plastics on. I'm going to use this Sur-On style seat, make some tabs and weld them up so we can mount that nice and securely. And we're going to have kind of an open fairing build for this SX 500. So let's get into it. First we got to clean this frame up and get it ready for some paint. The surface rust really just comes off pretty quickly, and the Rust-Oleum paint works really well at kind of neutralizing that rust and keeping it from coming through again. Yeah, it's not perfect, it probably won't last forever, but it's gonna look a heck of a lot better than it did, and it's gonna provide it many more years of protection, because at this rate this thing would fall apart if you leave it out in the elements. Look at that, it comes right off. Nice. We're also going to cut any of these tabs that we don't need and clean this swing arm up before we paint it, and we'll take this kickstand off and get that all nice and cleaned up. That's what that wedge looks like. I'd get cut down and put in so it could fit in there. All right, so whenever you're painting, start somewhere not important. So I just started on the bottom of this build, and that's with this metallic finish Rust-Oleum, and it looks like crap. So we are not going to use that. We're going to go back to my favorite, which is a semi-gloss black, or I even like flat black, but we're going to give it a little bit of a shine. We're going to go black, and it's going to look great. So let's do that. Here we go. She's painted up. It's been a few weeks. We've let this harden for about a week. You never want to start bolting stuff up right away. It does take a little while for this paint to dry. And we also got some parts in. So these by themselves are for really small bikes, you know, 50cc bikes for little kids. These are really lightweight. So what you do is you bolt up a bunch of these together. So in order to make the risers work, I got 2 on the top, and then I'm going to put 3 on the bottom because the force of the fork is this way. So I feel like most of the force is on the bottom. So we'll put an extra layer of protection. Now most people report just using 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom are fine. These are about $4 each, so there really isn't much extra expense being extra careful. All right, we're gonna change things up just a little bit. I know I said a $500 build. I'll show you how to do that and what parts you need to hit that $500 mark. But while I'm here, instead of doing double work, I have these parts laying around anyway, and I wanted a street build that's even more compact than your typical SX. So I actually installed some really inexpensive front forks that are a nice upgrade, and they're a little bit lower. I've reduced the rear suspension to 190 millimeters from, I believe, 220, so that'll make the rear end sit a little lower as well. And then I'm going to put some street tires on this bad boy. So we're going to make more of a street cruiser with the naked frame and the upgraded Sur-On seat, which I have to figure out how to mount it somehow. But this is the build I'm going for. A cruiser that's nice to take out on the grass or on the streets, of course. Not one of the ones that you're going to be tearing up and getting all dirty in the mud. So here's what it looks like right now. We got, of course, the battery in there, fit really nicely with a wedge in the bottom. We have our Vevor controller. Now with the controller, I'm going to start with this. It's great to get you moving, get you used to it, but they don't have a great throttle response. They're real sensitive. So if you have a real light child, or you know, a woman, and there's not a lot of weight behind it, it really does take off pretty quickly, and it can kind of scare the kids. So eventually you'll want to upgrade this to a far driver or something with a smoother throttle response. But for now, for the budget build for 500 bucks to match this battery nicely, this is great. 120 bucks gets you your motor and controller kit with your throttles and everything, and then I think this was on sale for $220 recently, and then normal price is $240, and then if you can get that roller like we were talking about for what, under 200 bucks, you're right around that $500 mark. We got to wire this battery up. We'll make a XT60 connector. Can you see that? XT60 connector for our battery so we can power this up. And then we also are going to upgrade the throttle system, the controller, and the readout for your voltage. Here's what comes with the Vevor kit. These are solid throttles. They got a key, they got a battery meter, and you know, it's going to get you going. So not bad at all. But if you've built a few of these, you'll start to understand that those can break on you if you lay the bike over. They might not work, so they might leave you stranded. You can get one of these metal throttles. I got this one on Alibaba. Hot Packs sells them, but you can get these Suron style throttles. It even says Suron on there, and these are a lot smoother and a lot nicer. The other thing I like to upgrade is to make sure you have a 3-speed switch. That way, depending on the rider, you can change how powerful your controller is. Now the Vevor controllers come with a little micro switch on the actual output. One of these little wires, like I think one of them have it, like this one here. I'll show you guys. I took it off because I actually used it on another build, but they include these little switches. So this one's the reverse, and then they put one on as well for your 3-speed, which is pretty cool. So you can use it right out of the box. You don't have to do any of this advanced wiring, but in the end, you're going to want one of these as well. The other thing is I like having a digital readout for my battery. That way I know it's the exact voltage. And then of course we want a key on and off switch, especially for a road bike. You might park this in front of Publix or wherever you're at, and you can take your key, you can lock your bike up, and it'll be more secure than just having an on and off switch where somebody can mess with it. Yeah, so that's about it. We're gonna mount the motor. We're gonna get those street tires put on the 10-inch wheels, and we're gonna get this seat mounted, get everything all wired up, and we'll be cruising in no time. What you'll have to do with these Vevor motors, if they have the bolts that stick out the back, you're going to have to countersink those. So you take out the bolt, you use a 5/16 drill bit, and you just drill in enough so the head is recessed, okay? So it's flat. So when you put this in, they're totally flat, and then you can mount your motor mounts up. Otherwise, those screws will hit in here and it won't line up very well at all. The other thing we got is our connectors for our motors on. So we have 12 gauge wire we're using for the controller, and then I also have a 14 gauge wire that we'll use for charging. So I'm going to have 2 different connectors on there so we don't have to unplug and plug back in. All right, we are at my favorite part of the build, and that is wiring up the controller. It might look pretty scary, all these additional wires, but actually these controllers have almost all the essentials and not all those additional ones that you will find on some other controllers. So we got a reverse switch, Hall sensors, that's for your motor. we have a 3-speed, which we're gonna use the switch on the handlebar. We have a key switch, so that's our key, and we have a throttle, so we're gonna use all those. These are what we're not going to use. We're not going to use a brake sensor or a brake indicator. Now that's cool if you have pit bike brakes that have the micro switch in there that can activate these. And what that'll do is it'll kill the power to the controller when you hit the brake, and it can light up your brake light. So we're going to go ahead and cut those off. I'm trying to make this as clean as possible because we don't have any fairings or anything to hide these wires under. And then of course you've got your power wire, and I love that they put an XT60 connector on there, and that's what we already wired up with the battery. And then of course you have your phase wires. So we will use one of these. Actually, I don't think we're going to use one of these. We're just going to wire these up with probably an M6 bolt and a locking washer, because what we find on these is they come loose and then they become a fire hazard. So I wouldn't use those. We're just gonna use some regular nuts and bolts, and then we're gonna wrap them in some cool electrical tape, and then we're gonna wrap all these wires up, I think in some like kind of fabric tape that they use on these builds, and this should look really nice. Now the 3-speed switch from the handlebars came with these pins, which is nice. And then I have a whole bunch of these. Let's check it out. I have a whole bunch of these connectors that I use on my builds, and I just get all this stuff on Alibaba for really cheap, and it makes it nice for anytime you're needing to make a connector or connection. So since I have the housing, and this is let's find it, the 3-speed is female and these are male, it's going to make it nice and easy. I don't know what color is the 1 and 2 on the controller, so let's just go ahead and put the black in the middle, of course, and we're going to put red on this side and green on this side. And that means we're gonna match up green with blue and red with yellow, and we'll see if that works. If not, I just swap those two, and that's easy enough. You can just get a little, what I use is a little dental pick, and I can get in there and pop those out and switch it around. And that'll save me time from having to look all that stuff up and using the meter. All right, so that's that connection. This is going to be our throttle. So this is the metal Sur-On throttle. That will hook up to this connection, and it looks like black, blue, and brown are those connectors. Yep. So we'll figure out which ones work up with that. And then this is going to be our key switch. So we're going to have a positive, a negative, and then a switched positive. That's going to activate when it's switched. So that will be interesting. We're going to have to source power for the negative, and because usually the key switch is a positive circuit, so we'll also have to find a negative so we can get the voltmeter to work. And that's it. Let's cut off this brake. And I'm just leaving a little bit because I'll put some shrink wrap on that. Boom. All right. Getting rid of connections. I like that. I'm going to leave the reverse on there because if I ever use this for a quad build, it is nice to have reverse on a quad. And yeah, we should be good to go. All right, let's get connectors on these, and we'll give it a test. All right, if you haven't seen my accessory wiring guide, go check that video out. But just real quickly, we're gonna have 2 different wires coming off of each battery lead. One is going to be for the motor, or the controller and the motor essentially, but that's got to be a thick wire, so using 12 gauge wire for this amperage. Now you have to do the calculations. If you're going to pull more amps, you need to have thicker wire. For our accessories, they're just LED lights, so this 14 gauge wire works perfectly. I have a fuse on my positive, and it's going to go to this wiring block. Now I have to be careful because this is all live connections. And then I'm going to have a switch that's going to activate this circuit and power the lights, the front and rear lights. So we're going to hook the lights up here, always on, switched power, always negative, and then we're also going to run the charging cable to this so that we don't have additional leads on the battery. So charging cables and our switched lights for all of our accessories. And that's what that looks like all wired up. We have our battery leads, we have our switch, and that is going to be to a charger, so the charger is always connected, and then these 2 are our switched circuits, negative and positive. We have the front and the rear lights. Let's see if they work. Switch. Oh yeah. Very nice. And we don't have to worry about any step down connector. These lights work on 48 volt and 72 volt and anything in between. So really, really easy to wire up. Had to make one more connection, and that was for the voltage meter to get ground. So I ran it to the ground side, the negative side of the terminal. So that way, when the key switch is on, the voltmeter will light up. When it's off, the voltmeter will shut down. So I don't know exactly if that is, if those are in the right pins, but we can't hurt anything to try it. So what we'll do is we'll connect it up, and I don't see anything up here on the voltmeter. I can get you guys up there. Oh, you know what? I don't have the battery plugged in, so let's go ahead and do that first. Haha. All right. That's the charger. Here we go. So, battery. Now you're gonna get a little pop. That's normal. Make sure your battery can handle that little surge. If not, it'll trip the BMS, and you can use a pre-charge resistor to charge the capacitors up without popping your BMS and kicking it into protection. So I think we're good. Let's put this back on here. So everything looks good. Always double check all your connections. We got our 3-speed, our key switch. All right, so now the battery is connected. Let's see if we get voltage. We got it correct. All right, perfect. So let me show you what wires matched up then. That was red and orange matching up, and green and red matching up, and then running a black to any ground on your system or any negative. So we matched black and black, blue and gray, and brown and red for the throttle. And then for the 3-speed, let's well, first let's see if it works. So yeah, all right. Oh, I'm on speed 3 over here, so we need to swap around the 3 speed pins because those are backwards. All right, we got the 3 speed switched around now. Let's make sure that works. That's definitely fast. 2. Yeah, perfect. All right, so the correct pairing for your 3 speed is green to yellow, black to black, and red to blue. So that's it. We are 100% wired up. Now we're just gonna dress these wires and get everything all nice and tidy, cleaned up. And then we need to mount this seat. And that's the last things we have to do. We got the lights working, 3 speed, voltmeter, Sur throttle. This thing is really looking awesome. Here she is, complete, at least for now. Works great. Love this battery. Love how affordable this Vevor kit is. It gets you started. It gets you started for a really, really fair price. It's not my favorite. I'll explain that in a second. But let me tell you, if you were to keep the stock forks on here and the controllers and stuff that come with the Vevor kit, this would price at just around 500 bucks. The other thing is we had to take the motor bracket off of these motors. Now you can buy them without it, but it did start hitting some things in here when we started to adjust the motor, because we deleted the chain tensioner, which makes these so much smoother and quieter. And you can get these brackets done. Now this was a prototype. The new one has a complete slot and a tensioner on the top so that you can get some really granular adjustments. This was too coarse with these screws, so I actually had to bore one out to get the exact adjustment I wanted. Now I'm still cleaning up these wires, but for now everything is mounted and working, and this thing is pretty darn sick. Now, a couple things I don't like about the build are these front forks. Now, if you have somebody really lightweight, like a child, I'd say maybe up to 80 pounds or so, these would be great front forks. But honestly, they're just too soft for an adult. When you put some serious front brake on, the front end dips pretty heavily. So far that it actually hits this brake wire, which I need to mount up. The other thing is we upgraded all the brakes. So these have the Zoom mountain bike brakes. And let me tell you, these are such a huge upgrade from stock. Yeah, they're not pit bike brakes with oversized rotors, but these will lock up the wheels, and there is no more stopping power than locking up the wheels. So these are great if you're gonna run these, you know, up to 30-35 miles an hour. You'll be fine with those. This battery has just been phenomenal. Now it pushes out 50 amps continuous. I haven't tested the peak, but I'm guessing you're going to get around 100 or more out of it. We'll test that in the next video. But this Vevor controller can only pull 35 amps, so it's a great match. This cannot pull more than this battery can provide, so you're never really going to overload this battery. The other thing is, when you have a deleted chain tensioner, you can actually get a controller that turns on regen and charge your battery up as well. So the Sur-On seat was actually the most difficult thing I'd say in the build. We had to make a couple custom plates. I had to weld a couple pieces together to make a flat enough piece to hit the stock Sur-On bolts with the stock Razor mounts. So the difference there was quite substantial. You know, I like the seat, it's super comfortable, but man, the part was just a pain, let me tell you. Overall, just an awesome build, no plastics. This is a naked frame, and I really wanted to try one of these, something super compact, 10-inch wheels on the front and back, and it keeps it nice and compact. The handlebars are even skinnier than stock, which, you know, is fine if you're having these slower builds, but if you get really up into going 30 plus 40 50 miles an hour, you want some big pit bike handlebars to give you some more stability. All right, so the moment you guys been waiting for, let's take her for a rip. The other thing I can't stand about these cheap controllers is the throttle response. It's so jumpy. Like, see, I'm just barely starting to give it power and it just wants to launch. Now, I don't know, other people say it's not a big deal, but I've had multiple kids, women, inexperienced riders try these cheap controllers, and every time they're like, but you know, I can tolerate it. I can, you know, lean forward and prepare for it, but it's just nothing like a far driver or a Votal controller where you get to actually adjust how much basically throttle, how fast you can engage the throttle. So you know, for basically 20 bucks or less, these controllers are dirt cheap. They're awesome, they get you rolling, but I'd highly recommend start with something like this. If you like it, fine, but have in your budget about $100 for a far driver controller. You're going to get a lot more power to your motor. You're going to be able to draw more power from the battery because those can go up to 80 or 100 amps. This is just 35 amps. And you can dial in your 3-speed switch. So I can adjust how fast it accelerates and its top speed for each one of the switches, which is great. So for the kids, I have a 1. For larger kids or adult, you know, newbie adults, I'll have it on 2, and I'll have that throttle nice and smooth. You know, they can yank it back, but the bike is not going to take out from underneath them. And then 3, of course, is just when you go all out. That's for me, essentially. All right, so that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching to the end. You guys are awesome. If you have any questions on this build and you want to check out links to all these products that I have, check out the links in the description. Ask me any questions that you guys want. There'll be more videos coming like this. We're gonna do an upgrade to this. I got a hub motor, my first hub motor. We're gonna slap it on this guy with a far driver controller, and we're gonna really see what we can get out of this battery. So I'm super excited about that. Like and subscribe, guys. See you on the next one. Gotta be careful. Woo. Oh, come on. I did it. Scratched up the new paint job.